Welcome back, everyone. We have such an incredible guest for this interview. We have Judy Battista. She is a columnist for NFL.com and a reporter for the NFL Network and Inside the NFL. Judy, we scheduled this interview like 4 or 5 days ago. And of course, the day before, one of the craziest things that has happened in the New York sports football area happened yesterday. So, first, I just want to know what was yesterday like for you? And just when breaking news like that happens, what is it like being a reporter when something like that happens?
Uh, so the day was normal, right? Like I was sitting here having coffee and like reading the papers and whatever. And then I got a text that he had been fired and it was off to the races. I knew I was going to have to write a column. I was scheduled to be on the Insiders last night anyway, so that is live at 7 o'clock. So obviously I knew we were going to be talking about that. But
Mhm.
I also knew I was going to have to write a column. So like immediately start thinking of like how you're going to frame this and any kind of reporting you want to do. I put some texts out and got some responses and just started writing. And I mean, it just sort of kept going because then Woody Johnson did a conference call in the middle of the day. So, you sort of adjust things then and then obviously got ready to start talking about it on TV. I mean, the column was a little bit easier for me to write in this case because I've covered the Jets for a long time. Like I was the beat reporter way back in the day. And I still talk to people there. It's a little bit easier because you have a little bit more institutional knowledge than if you were
Mhm.
just dropping in cold on a team that you're not totally familiar with. So in that respect, it was a little bit easier, but it's just like that's just sort of what happens on days like that. Like you just drop everything. And like I really did think, like I said to you before we started recording, like it's a good thing we didn't schedule this for yesterday because I would definitely have had to bail. Like the day just
Right.
totally blew up. So, I mean, but that's what being a reporter is.
And that got me thinking about, your like incredibly experienced. You've been reporting in sports for so long. What's the craziest piece of news that you've had to report on that like wasn't expected at all? Like you woke up thinking it's going to be a normal day, and then all of a sudden, a situation like that happens. Do you have like a craziest story in that regard?
Well, it's actually Jets also, which
Nice.
but when I was on the beat, so my first year on the beat was 2000, and the coach was Al Groh. He is the person who became coach when Bill Belichick bailed out when he was supposed to be coach. So Al Groh, he had just finished his first season. They did not make the playoffs that year, but they were decent. They were fine. They were not a train wreck. And I was covering a playoff game in Miami. So I'm in the Miami Dolphins press box on whatever day it was. And I get a text or I get a phone call at that point. Al Groh just resigned. Totally out of the blue. Like, what? Totally out of the blue. Um, and so literally I'm covering a playoff game. Like you just stop covering the playoff game, right? Like there's a game happening
Mhm.
in front of you. I had to call my office. I was working at the New York Times and I called and said like, and I remember the editor who was on duty said like, "Well, are you still going to be able to write about the playoff game?" And I'm like, "No, I am not going to because I'm not going to see one more snap of this game." Like, and I just went back into like, there's like a lunchroom at the back of the press box there, and so I didn't want to bother all the reporters who were actually covering the game. So you
Mhm.
could see there were a bunch of Jets reporters covering that game, and like you could just see we all got up out of our chairs, went into the lunchroom, and like that we sort of set up camp there, and like we were reporting and writing like what the heck happened. So that was like a crazy just because of the circumstance. And he was leaving to go coach his alma mater, the University of Virginia, which was a nice story and it was great,
Mhm.
but it was just like so out of the blue. And so you had to like put in calls to everybody, including players who were like, huh? So that was kind of bonkers just because of the setting. There've been some, weird stories though. I mean, just like that's sort of the nature of sports is stuff happens.
Absolutely. And one more career question before we move into some Robert Saleh talk, because I'm very excited to talk about that. As I mentioned, like you've been just such a pioneer in the game of reporting for the NFL and things. You've seen a lot. How do you think the way that reporting has, just evolved from like where you were when you were first starting out to where, the current state of reporting in sports is today?
Oh, I mean, it's changed entirely.
Mhm.
When I first started, there was no, newspapers had the most rudimentary websites. So there was nothing about like writing for online. There were no blogs, there was no Twitter or Instagram, there was just none of that. But even just like, if you were a newspaper reporter at that point, like you were worried about the next day's edition. Like you would go and buy the newspapers to make sure your competition didn't have a story you didn't have. But now it's obviously all instantaneous, and really like Twitter and Instagram have totally taken over, right? I mean, everything is just instant.
Yeah.
That's good in some ways. It's really good for consumers, right? Because you're not waiting for the next day's paper, but um, it's dinged reporting. There's no question. It hasn't been great for reporting because the rush to get stuff out, like people are not double checking things. You're not, you used to have two sources. If you were
Hmm.
using anonymous sources, that's gone. So I do think the quality of the reporting has taken a hit in a lot of cases. But the instant nature of it it's
Hmm.
just completely transformed the business.
And do you feel pressure in that regard of trying to get things out quicker, like because you were there before, the social media kind of boom of the way reporting has changed. How do you handle the difference in, what consumers expect from columnists and writers?
Well, I think as a columnist, like there's less pressure on
Right.
me to get news out right away, right? That's not really my role anymore. I cannot imagine being a beat writer now. Like, I think the pressure must be intense. Like,
Hmm.
pressure was intense anyway, and now the sort of instant nature of it is just, I gotta think it's even just tenfold. Um, so it probably hasn't affected my job as much as it
Hmm.
has other reporters. You know, I think you have to be aware though that like if you put something out on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, Threads, whatever form you're using, like a lot of people see it right away.
Yeah.
And so you got to be right. Like that is that's a responsibility that sometimes I fear like the instant nature of it sort of takes away that guardrail. There's no editors reading you. Like you have to be
Right.
conscious of the fact, like there's no copy desk reading you and saying like, well, do we really want to say it like that? Like, you have to
Yeah.
self-edit, and you have to do it really fast. So that has changed, and there's a bit of pressure there.
And especially for like, if you think of someone like Shams or Woj, who, everyone who is a sports fan has them on tweet notification. So if there's a mistake, like there's
Right.
there's no going back. People are going to screenshot it, and you
Yeah.
look at the Aaron Judge situation, Arson Judge signing to the Giants.
Yes. Yeah.
That was a complete thing as well. So that kind of pressure, I feel like, totally
Yes.
is different than what it was before.
Yeah, it's totally like when I worked at the Times, like your copy went through at least two layers of editing. Like, and
Yeah.
one person was just doing like the grammar and the spelling, like that kind of stuff. And then the other, but there were people just editing for content, right? Really asking you like, where did you get that? Like, how good is your source? Are you sure we should frame it this way? Like, and that's gone. Like
Mhm.
that's gone. So it's all on you to do that. So there's some pressure there.
Well, let's talk some New York Giants because that's the biggest story of New York sports, besides maybe the Mets, because that is a whole other thing as well. Hopefully they clinch tonight. But Robert Saleh fired. Did not see that coming whatsoever. I mean, maybe at the end of the season, obviously things weren't going great for the New York Jets, but I just want to know, what were your first reactions when you get that text and you're like, oh, wow, okay, the Jets head coach is completely gone?
Um, I was surprised that it happened after week 5. I was not surprised that it happened.
Right.
And I even thought it was possible that he would be fired in season. Uh, I have talked to people at the Jets, as I said, like I'm still in touch with a lot of people at the Jets. And so I knew that there were concerns even after last season, now, which obviously was a disaster of last season, but everybody sort of said, like, chalk that up to, well, Aaron Rodgers got hurt 4 snaps into the season. So obviously the season was a disaster. But I knew that there were feelings inside the building that, Saleh did not they thought Saleh maybe didn't handle it well, didn't do the best job sort of rallying the team and adjusting. So I knew that that was sort of the feeling even going into the season. And Woody Johnson, the owner of the team, had said publicly um, to reporters, that he had made it clear to the Brain Trust that he was angry about how the season went and like this was unacceptable and it had to get better. So to me, Robert Saleh was on notice, right? Like if the owner says I was as mad as I can be, and I think I got the message across, like this can't happen.
Mhm.
And he this is the giveaway. He said, we have all of this talent. We've got to be able to deploy this talent properly, something to that effect. So
Mhm.
when he's saying that, he's saying, well, it's not the player's fault. Well, then whose fault is it? Well, it's got to be the coaches, right?
Yeah.
So to me, they were on notice from that moment. And that happened at the Super Bowl. Woody talked to reporters at the Super Bowl.
Mhm.
So I knew they were concerned. And then the last two games have just been dreadful and repeated a lot of the things that happened last year. I mean, the offense looks terrible. The defense is keeping them in games, putting all the pressure on the defense to hold it together. And then the offense can't do anything. Aaron Rodgers played two of his worst games ever in the last 2 weeks. They're getting penalties like crazy. They were the most penalized team last year, and they're the most penalized team right now. And that's a coaching thing. I mean, that's just a discipline thing. And, so that was bad. So there's certainly an argument to be made that it was too early. And if the leash was going to be that short, you should have just made the move in the offseason. Like
Mhm.
then, if you were that worried about it. But there's also an argument to be made that like why throw good money after bad? Like you've got this very, very narrow window of time with Aaron Rodgers. And if you still think that he is capable of winning at the highest level, which they obviously do, then it's better to pull the plug now, if you think you're headed in the wrong direction, because next Monday night they play the Bills with a chance to be in first place. The winner of
Mhm.
that team will be in first place. So if you think the team is headed down the wrong path, there's no why are you wasting any time in correcting the path? If you think you need to correct the path, then correct the path as fast as you can. And obviously that's what Woody Johnson thought. So I guess I was surprised that it happened after only 5 weeks, but like when you step back and think about it, it's like, well, how many more weeks really was it going to go? Because if it kept
Right.
going as bad as it has been the last 2 weeks, it should not have gone on much longer.
Well, we think about the offense, and the offense has been just really bad. I mean, just from top to bottom. And then you have to look at the offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett, who's been getting a lot of negative feedback from fans and from what I've heard, players as well. But obviously, you have to take into account that relationship he has with Aaron Rodgers. And I think this move in particular could be really telling on what the inside relationship is like, because you fire Saleh, Hackett is still the offensive coordinator. So I'm wondering what your opinion on all of this is, as far as like keeping Hackett around, going right for Saleh, and then how important that relationship between Rodgers and Hackett is, as far as Hackett keeping his job for, as long as Rodgers is around.
Well, I don't think there's any question that Hackett has kept his job. I mean, there were concerns again after last season. There were
Mm-hmm.
concerns about Hackett, to the point where the Jets wanted to hire Arthur Smith, who is now the offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh, the former head coach of the Falcons, well-regarded offensive coordinator. The Jets wanted to bring him in with Hackett. They weren't going to fire Hackett, but they wanted
Mm-hmm.
to bring him in and have him overseeing it. So there was already a serious level of concern coming out of last season. And again, part of that is because they didn't adjust last year. And I know, again, it's easy to say like, well, Aaron Rodgers was gone. The whole everybody gets a mulligan. And it's like, well, except a lot of other teams lost their starting quarterbacks last year
Mm-hmm.
and did really well with backup quarterbacks. I mean, the Cleveland Browns played 5 quarterbacks last year and went to the playoffs. Like
Yeah.
that's crazy. That guy was the coach of the year, Kevin Stefanski. So, you know, don't forget, like the Jets people are looking at that and saying, well, wait a minute, why can other teams do that? And our offensive coordinator and head coach can't do it. So there were concerns about Hackett. There's no question that he is insulated by his relationship with Rodgers, because Rodgers trusts him and has had great success with him and literally talks about him like he's a brother. I mean, loves him, says
Mm-hmm.
he loves him. So there is a professional and a personal relationship there. And that certainly is protecting Rodgers. Having said that, the interim head coach here, Jeff Ulbrich, apparently has the authority to reshape his staff if he
Mm-hmm.
wants. Now, he said yesterday, like, there's not going to be any changes in titles, so he's not going to demote or fire Hackett, it seems like. but he might shake up responsibilities, which to me sounds like it's possible that Hackett will not continue to call plays. Like at some point they may make that decision. We'll see. But don't forget, everything is about Aaron Rodgers'
Yeah.
comfort level. And frankly, everything should be about his comfort level because the whole operation is built around him. So if he's not comfortable with who the play caller is, or he's not comfortable about the design of the offense, like that's not good. Like the priority has to be that he is comfortable with the offense and can function in it at a high level.
Well, with how much uncertainty there is just around the coaching staff and the Jets in general, this next question might seem a little bit impossible, but I do want to hear your opinion. Do you think the Jets are still like legitimate contenders for the Super Bowl? I mean, Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers. He could turn it on at any point, and the defense is not bad by any means. But from your opinion, is it a reasonable expectation for this team to make a deep playoff run at this point?
Well, I think if the course correction that Woody Johnson's calculation was the roster is really good. We just needed a different message. We needed a different messenger. If he's
Mhm.
right, then yes, because they are talented. Um, and the last two games have been bad, but like, if Greg Sirline kicks that field goal against the Broncos, we chalk that up to, well, that was an ugly win, but it's still a win, right? And they're 3-2. Okay, that's fine. Um, so it would look a lot less bleak than it does right now. But again, if they beat the Bills next Monday night, like they're in first place in the division, right? Nobody's running away with the division. That's
Mhm.
clear. So, um, can they make a Super Bowl run? I don't know, but I do think they're a playoff caliber roster. And so generally in the NFL, we do see that like head coaching changes midseason do give you some juice. How long that lasts, we don't know. But yeah, they should be they are underperforming right now. So they should be performing at a level that gets them to the playoffs.
Well, let's move over a little bit to some New York Giants talk because they just came off of a big win. But overall, I feel like Giants fans are still a little bit pessimistic about the way the season has gone so far. Just what have you made of this season? Daniel Jones in general coming off of that injury last year, and again, kind of the same tone of the Jets. Where should expectations be for the New York Giants?
God, I don't know. They're so up and down, right? Like sometimes they just like you want to cover your eyes, and then sometimes you're like, oh, they look pretty good. I mean,
Yeah,
against Seattle, a good team, very tough place to play, big road trip. Like, okay, Daniel Jones
there's
looked pretty
something to this.
good.
Yeah.
And certainly Malik Neighbors is just like a highlight film to watch, right?
Hmm.
He's fantastic, and he wasn't even playing, and so I don't know what to make. I think if they could get some sort of consistency on offense where they can get to a level where, again, just consistent, where you know what to expect, then I think they can be not bad. This is another division that is, nobody's running away with it, right? Like the Eagles are not, at least right now, are not what we thought they were going to be. They're not the juggernaut we expected yet, nor are the Cowboys. Now the Commanders are coming on strong and they have a
Hmm.
phenom at quarterback right now, but they're still a young team, a young quarterback with a, up and down defense. Like, so you don't really know how that's going to pan out over 17 games. Um, so, I think if they could just get some consistency, they might be okay and they can stay in the mix. I don't know if they can compete at the highest levels of the NFC. I don't know. But then
Hmm.
again, the highest levels of the NFC don't look like what we thought they were going to look like either. I mean, the San Francisco 49ers have basically owned the NFC and they're obviously struggling. So, this feels like a year where there's not going to be a runaway team, even though the Vikings are undefeated, like, and I mean, and the Chiefs are undefeated, but it still doesn't feel like a season where everybody's going to be chasing one or two dominant teams. So I feel like if you can just sort of stay in the mix, you have a chance at the end.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. I think being a Giants fan, I have a lot of friends who are Giants fans. It just seems like such a crazy experience this year, like just
Yeah,
with the way.
it's really up and down. And sometimes Daniel Jones looks like, I can't believe this is the starting quarterback for the New York Giants. And sometimes he looks good. Like, right? And you're like, okay, yeah. Uh, so again, if they could just get to consistency, and a lot of that goes to also how the offensive line is doing. The offensive line has bad days and then they have some pretty good days. So again, if they could get some steadiness out of the offensive line, and when Malik Neighbors comes back, like that,
Hmm.
huge difference.
Well, hopefully some brighter days or continuing bright days after last week for the New York
Yeah.
Giants. I have one question for you about my Tennessee Titans. It is, yeah, already that expression is not making me feel good about the answer
I
to my
was
next
just at that game.
question.
I was at the game in week two. Two. Yeah,
Hmm.
that was the game I was at.
The Jets
Jets.
game.
Yeah.
I was working the game for SNY, so I was like tears in my eyes, like
Ugh.
posting Jets highlights, like yay, even
Yeah.
though
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was killing me. But um, let's talk a little about Will Levis because for me, it's so hot and cold. Like sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy, like he is so young and he's doing crazy things in a good way, and then the next play, it's like this is the craziest thing I've ever seen in the worst way possible.
Well,
So
Brian Callahan, right? The coach is like, I mean, all you have to do is watch his face, right? Because
yeah,
sometimes Will Levis uncorks a throw that you're like, oh my God, wow, okay. And then, and then he will like try that, whatever he did against the Jets, right? Where he tried to pitch. I don't even know what he was attempting to do, and the ball, and it was a turnover. And I mean, Callahan literally, I mean, you could read his lips, what he said to him.
yeah.
And like that has happened multiple times where Callahan looks like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I think it's interesting. Callahan has said about Levis, like, he doesn't get mad at him for like, if he's trying to throw a pass and a defender steps in front of it, okay, that happens. Even to
Hmm.
the it just happened to Aaron Rodgers. Like
Hmm.
that happens. It's when he makes the same mistake over and over again, like
Yeah.
that drives Callahan and it would drive any coach bananas, right? Like he's got
Drives
to
me crazy.
Right. He's got to stop the turnovers, right? I mean, that's just number one. Like the turnovers have to be cut back.
Hmm.
He obviously has physical skills, though. I mean, obviously he does have some skills. So um, it's hard to give up on him completely because you know that the physical ability is there. It is just sort of corralling it and teaching him to like sometimes it's okay to just take a sack. Like,
Hmm.
it's okay. You don't have to try to have like a superhero play kind of here. Like, don't do anything crazy. Um, sometimes it's okay to take the safe play. And I think they've got to sort of drill that into him. But it's hard to give up on somebody when you do see those flashes of ability.
Yeah, I think my biggest concern is those plays that he makes that are just like, what's happening right now? Feel like those are like his instincts. And that's not a good sign
Right.
because if your instincts are to do the things he's doing, that is, a big part of being a good NFL quarterback is having good instincts. And
Right.
those plays that he makes don't feel like those are things he's thinking through, or at least I sincerely hope not. So that is something I think that's my biggest concern is like just the football IQ, the football instincts just are not there yet. And that's one of those things where it's like, I don't know if that's something you can learn with more experience.
Right. Right. I guess the question is, can coaching sort of coach him out
Yeah.
of that? Like retrain him to
Hmm.
to understand that like you don't have to make a crazy play. You can just, again, you can just take the sack. It's okay.
Yeah.
Right. Live to see another day. Like that's okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I have just a couple more questions for you. Again, I
Yeah.
really, really appreciate the time. My first question, obviously you are married to Anthony McCarron, someone who is an incredible analyst, writer for SNY. So I was wondering, just and your daughter Grace is also in the sports world at WFUV. In the Batista McCarron household, is it just like sports talk 24/7? Like I can't imagine, you both do it all the time, or is it a situation where when you guys aren't working, it's like let's talk about something other than sports?
It is not sports talk 24/7.
Okay.
It, I mean, it's a lot of sports is on TV. I'll say that. Like we
Hmm.
generally have a game or something on most nights, but it is not sports talk 24/7 because I think that would drive both of us
Yeah.
because our lives are already consumed by like people, you know, lots of people write sports books, baseball, football, sports books, and like I I don't read most of them to be honest because I'm like I cannot devote another second of my life to thinking about football, right? Like I already
Yep.
spent a ridiculous amount of time thinking about football. For a grown person to be spending this much time thinking about football is weird. And it's like it's also part of why like as great as college football is, like I do not spend all day Saturday watching college football because like it's just like I spend all day Sunday watching
Watching
football. Like,
football.
and then I spend the entire rest of the week analyzing football. Like, so it's like
Gotta have a break.
I just can't spend I can't spend another 14 hours watching football. So no, we do not talk about football all the time. Although it is a Mets household. So we spent some time watching baseball, that's for
Of
sure.
course.
Yeah.
But one more question for you. As someone who like has to analyze pretty much every team, both in writing and on TV, I've always wondered, are NFL analysts, are you guys red zone watchers or are you guys watching like individual games, like multi-screen kind of situation? I've always wondered, like, what is your way of watching football on Sundays?
So first of all, if I'm at a game, then I'm just
Right.
watching the game and I'm
Hmm.
trying to follow the scores online, but not, you're just if you're assigned to cover one game, then I'm just focusing on
Hmm.
that. If I'm writing something broader, like on a Sunday, if I'm sort of doing a big picture, and so maybe I'm doing it from home, then I have like one game on TV, just whatever it's either Jets or Giants usually that's on locally. And then I have a game on my phone, I have a game on my iPad, I have a game on my laptop. So then I usually have multiple games. So I don't watch, I sometimes will watch Red Zone, but like usually if you have to write, you need more than just the scoring plays, right?
Right.
You need to see more of the flow of the game. So I watch Red Zone just to sort of catch up quickly, but mostly I'm watching multiple games at the same time, which is not that easy to follow. You just sort of have to, I mean, Twitter is actually really useful for this because you can see the tweets from the writers who are there, and so you sort of see the trends and you know what games you have to pay attention to. If something crazy has happened or if a quarterback's gotten hurt or something, some storyline is developing. So that actually is helpful as sort of a news wire to sort of get you caught up on what's happening. But I usually have games going, multiple games.
Awesome. Makes total sense. I mean, obviously, I'm not in the same profession as you, so I'm a big red zone watcher just for entertainment purposes. But I mean, the
Yeah.
multiple TVs seems like the way to go for you.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to follow, but it's really like it's so great when you can have like, like five screens going at the same time and everybody's coming down at the end,
Right.
like there's multiple endings that are going to be good. It's really cool.
Well, Judy, the insight has been just absolutely incredible. I can't thank you enough for taking the
My
time. And
pleasure.
seriously, good luck with the rest of the season. I'm sure it's going to be a crazy ending for both
Thank
the
you.
Jets and the Giants.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course.